And I believe we're live.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us. And just in case you're confused, we are not Nigel Farage's new party. We are the Renew Party, as we haven't always have been, and we are not anything like Nigel Farage. Anyway, now we've got that out of the way. Tonight, as usual, I'm joined by Renew's leader, James Clarke.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Heather. Hi, Tom.
Hey. I'm also joined for the first time by Renew's new Chief Executive Officer, Tom Meek.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Tom. So let's start with you. You've relatively recently joined Renew, and so I think it would be really nice for people to hear a little bit about you and your background. So would you mind telling us about yourself?
Yeah, of course. Very happy to be here, and thanks for setting this up. I think the technology would have defeated me, James, if you'd let me try and do it just for this evening. So I'm glad that you.
Fine, but I stepped in anyway.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, you're right. So I haven't been a member of the party for that long. I met Richard, our chairman, in May or thereabouts, kind of halfway through our first and very stringent lockdown. And we have very clear overlapping ideas, almost identical in many, many ways. I left the Foreign Office in 2017 and had started work on my own little project, which was called Democratic Renewal. And this was around the same ideas that Renew has, is how do you reform the core kind of political system, the political culture that we have in the country at the moment, which generates all of the problems, which I'm sure we're going to come on and talk about shortly. And
possibly not all of them, Tom. There are too many, but yes.
You're right. Yes, we don't have that much time. And so Richard and I got talking, and I met James and David and some of the others, and this led quite naturally to me joining the party. Firstly, as the kind of policy lead on particularly this idea about reform and how we refocus on reform and relaunch around that idea. And then it just expanded into kind of helping the party organize, structure itself and deliver on the many tasks that we have. And very, very kindly and flatteringly, the end of last month, Richard told me he was thinking of putting me forward, or had been talking to board members about saying, well, why don't we ask Tom to take on the role of CEO? So that was done at the end of last month. So I'm very new into that role, but loving it. It's fantastic. What a great place to be, and what an important time to be doing it as well.
Well, and we are thrilled to have you. So, I mean, why the Renew Party? Why not continue with your own project or try to influence some of the other parties? Why us?
So Renew is an interesting beast because it's been known to me. I knew about Renew from when you launched. I watched that conference with James Torrance and Annabelle, I think, were the three standing up at the lecterns in 2018. So I knew of Renew, and you've survived. You've lasted the course, and now I've joined the party. I obviously know what has happened and the kind of roller coaster and the learning experiences that you've all gone through. And so my pitch, as it were, when I was working on my own democratic renewal agenda, was just, I want to change the political culture of the UK. And I didn't really have a firm or fixed view about how I would achieve that end, whether it was someone else took the ideas forward, or whether it led to a party, or whether it led to kind of campaigning separately. I didn't have a kind of fixed view on that. It was just the end goal that mattered. And then Renew, when I met Richard, it just seemed such an obvious fit to say, well, there's a vehicle which has been doing this for the last 3 years. Why not augment that? Why not work together? Why not try and collaborate? Which is, again, it's a core mantra for Renew. It's collaboration, cooperation with others of like-minded fellow travelers. And so it's just a very natural fit. There was never a question of kind of trying to set up a party of my own. And so there's no conflict in that respect. And I also figured that the established parties are part of the problem. The way that the established parties work and the way that the structures incentivize people who want to join or take part in politics, that's part of the problem. So even if a current party had come up and said, and established, the Lib Dems, the Tories or the Labour Party had said, we really like these ideas, Tom, come and help us implement them. I would have been incredibly, that would never have happened, obviously, but, let's just think as a thought experiment. I just wouldn't have trusted them to take those ideas forward and do that. So I'm much, much happier here because we are fellow travelers. It's very clear, and we see things the same way. It's about doing politics differently. It's about being a different type of party. So I'm very happy here.
Well, and you touched on briefly there that you're a former Foreign Office chap. So you were a part of the civil service rather than part of the government, but you've obviously seen an awful lot from the inside. What was that experience like? Well,
that's a great question, because that really started me on this journey. So my last job overseas was in New York at the UN, which is quite a centre for ministers. They love going there for pretty obvious reasons. It's high profile. There's lots of opportunities for photo ops and media coverage, and there's a lot of issues which are serious issues which get dealt with there. And seeing ministers operate up close just made me increasingly disillusioned. It came very, very clear that what motivates most of these middle-ranking and senior-level politicians is not what is the brief, what's their issue. It's not even really their constituents or the kind of greater good of the country, if you could define that in any particular set of circumstances. It's almost always about them and about what they need to do to get to the next rung on the ladder. And that just increasingly turned me off. And I just started thinking about why it was like that. And this was before Isabel Hardman wrote this wonderful book, which if you haven't read, I'm sure you both have. Anyone watching, I commend it to you very, very highly. Why we get the wrong politicians. And I was having these ideas. This is the disclaimer. I had not copied her book, and she certainly hasn't copied my ideas. But I was thinking these thoughts and writing this stuff down before her book came out. And it was hugely, hugely encouraging to me to read her book and realize that we both have the same analysis. We have very strange incentives for politicians right from the beginning, and that's why we end up with the politics we get. And I saw that up close when I was in the Foreign Office. You're right.
Ask her to join, Tom. Do you have contact details?
Well, she writes for the Spectator, so she's pretty clear on where her politics lie. So yeah.
I have to apologise. I do seem to be in the middle of a fireworks display here. It's not rioting outside, nothing to do with the US election or anything like that. But I hope it's not too off-putting for you that I'm speaking to or anybody who's listening. Well, but speaking of US politics, it's a big week, and I kind of thought that by now we would know a more definitive outcome than we currently do. Have you been watching it, Tom?
I have, yeah. I've been up far too late the last 2 nights and probably had far too much wine to help me kind of get through those nights as well. So yeah, I need to have a break. And actually, one of the things I think I've come to the conclusion of today is it's not going to happen that quickly. We might get Georgia, but Nevada, I think they've announced, it's resolved. It's now down to these kind of Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, perhaps not, but Pennsylvania. And if Arizona and Nevada go Biden's way, obviously he's in. If Pennsylvania goes his way, he's in. And anything else, the permutations get complicated. But it seems to be that the counting is slowing right down, certainly in Nevada. They're saying they're not even sure whether they're going to get all the ballots before Tuesday next week, which I think their state laws allow them to take ballots up until then, and they're not going to count very quickly. So I don't know that we'll get Nevada quickly, maybe Georgia, maybe Pennsylvania. We're just all waiting now. I mean, it seems to be going Biden's way. Let's hope and cross our fingers that that's where we end up. Because I think Trump is just, the way he undermines democratic norms, which we can talk about a little bit, I'm sure. I think it's dangerous, not just for America, but for the wider world as well. So, but sadly, I think it's going to go on like this for a couple more days at least.
Gosh, James, I mean, what do you think is going on? Can you actually believe what Donald Trump is doing? That he's trying to say that this is a fraud on the American people, I think he's called it, which seems to be quite staggering. There is no actual evidence of that, is there?
No, that's right. I mean, we mustn't be too surprised, because he did say that's what he was going to do. You know, we've been aware that calling the election into, you know, disrepute, or however you want to put it, is something that was always on the cards. It does, you know, if we're looking at silver linings, it does look like the behaviour of a loser, you know. And I think there's nothing that would sting Trump more than being called out as a sore loser. And I think he's probably felt he was going to lose for quite a long while, and has been foreshadowing this behaviour in the coming weeks. I was talking to my friends in the US. One particular lives in Georgia, and teasing him a little bit about the count. You know, I was asking, were they using an abacus, or why is this going? My other friend from Canada chipped in and suggested they outsource the voting to India, where they managed to count 900 million votes in 5
Oh, they did. They had that amazing election, didn't they? Where they counted, so quickly. Interesting.
I've been put in my place by a couple of articles people sent me saying, no, it's absolutely right the way they're doing it. They are allowing people, I believe, to vote by post on the day, which I don't think we do here. The
No.
deadline for the postal vote is earlier here, not so in every US state, which means that it's inevitable that it would take an extra few days. But it's bizarre that that situation is not fixed, so that the full results can come in more quickly.
And it doesn't seem to be exactly the same in every state, does it?
That's right. It's obviously the states themselves are allowed to use different methods to collect the vote, and that's part of the problem.
I think one of the really nice things that has come across, certainly I've been glued to CNN, which again I would highly commend to anyone who's following this, because you get a native American view rather than trying to watch Sky or the BBC news channel. And one of the things I think has come across very clearly is that the system is really is bearing up under this strain, not just the kind of physical, practical strain of counting these votes and delivering the results, but also the political and emotional strain that the president is exerting on them. And you get so many lovely, hardworking, absolutely exhausted secretaries
to be counted,
of state.
but it seems that when you look at the votes left to be counted, where they are from, that according to our numbers, Biden needs somewhere between 58 and 61% of those votes to win.
Is that you giving us a blast of CNN there, Tom?
I'm sorry. I hadn't realized. I don't know why that suddenly started again. That's me. I've been watching CNN.
There we go.
But all of these election officials are just doing what they're supposed to do, and they're doing it without political favor or without fear. They are brilliant. When you hear them talk on CNN about what the process is, and you can tell that they have real confidence in that process themselves, and that's coming across. And I hope the American people do at the end of this as well.
Yeah, gosh, that must be such a difficult thing to be dealing with, because they are under enormous pressure. But what do you think it means for the society in America when Donald Trump is obviously trying to whip up his supporters to believe that he has been defrauded out of the White House? What happens next? How do we move on from that?
Yeah, James can answer that one first. I'll give you some thoughts on that. I can put him on the box.
In a way, Trump, as I hinted at before, may have felt that he was not going to win the election, and is perhaps preparing for what comes next, which will probably be, a big TV job, perhaps running his own sort of reactionary network that's stoked on the concept of resentment. And just as his political career was launched with birtherism and suggesting Obama wasn't American, I think his next stage, if he does indeed lose the election, will be stoking this sort of resentment based on the theft of an election, and that being his step into the next thing. And the worry is, of course, could he do more harm outside the White House than in? Whichever ways this goes in the next few days, there's an awful lot of trouble ahead.
Yeah, you're right. I think there's so much uncertainty, and there is so much polarity. There's so much kind of schism and division in the society that the risks are very, very great, whether he's inside the White House or not. I think the interesting question for us observers is whether post-Trump, whether that's after another 4 years, and I think we've tweeted on this topic, who comes after him, not as a president, but within the Republican Party. What's his legacy within the Republican Party? Does it revert to a more as we would see it, a more rational kind of sensitive, sensible approach, or is there a post-Trump legacy which is even more Trumpy? I hope we get the former, and there were some indications. So some of these congressmen who've been re-elected, Adam Kinzinger, I think his name is an Illinois congressman, he was on CNN, and he was saying very directly that what Trump has been saying about potential fraud is absolutely unwarranted, unconscionable, and downright dangerous. So there are voices out there on the Republican side who I think have been speaking out, and maybe with Trump's departure from the formal political scene, there's an opportunity for that kind of Republican Party to reassert itself. I sincerely hope so.
Those people you mentioned are very much in the minority. I think the vast majority of people who, when Trump was becoming the candidate, began to be a little bit quiet. They've been remarkably quiet for 4 years, and now he's undermining the entire democratic process, and only a handful of people have the bravery or the conviction to come out and say anything.
Yeah.
So I think it goes back to why we get the politicians we do. I mean, if you can't stand up and say this is wrong, then you really ought not to be in public service at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, if you say nothing, you're effectively enabling it, aren't you?
Yeah, and there's I'm sure there'll be a lot of kind of postmortems and reviews on particularly the polling, but there's been some interesting articles already about what kind of a presidency Biden would have if he does win it, and he's not likely to get the Senate, and he's going to get a slightly weaker House of Representatives, so he may be a lame duck from day one. Who knows? Let's see. Maybe he focuses on foreign affairs rather than the domestic agenda. But there is also quite a lot emerging around, while this Democratic group still doesn't really understand why Trump was successful, and why he's continuing to be successful and supported. And they do need to. And it's the same here as well for us. Why is Boris successful? I mean, some of us look at this and go, unbelievable. How can he be like this? How can people vote for him? So those are the kind of parallels which I think do merit kind of close attention, both here and in the US.
100%. I think what we underestimate here in the centre left, centre right, wherever you want to call it, is the same in the US. People who vote Democrat or people who don't vote Conservative here struggle to understand why people do that. But I think it's quite clear in many cases that it's not being pro-Trump, it's being anti-Democrat that motivates.
Yeah.
And in the UK,
the fear of socialism.
It wasn't being pro-Boris, it was fear of Corbyn. And we know that for a fact from the doors we knocked in 2019 and 2018.
Yeah.
So that being the case, it may be that the parties of the left and centre left need to get their act together, either substantively or in terms of PR, because people will vote for quite unsafe characters if they fear worse.
Yeah, yes, you're right. And it'll be really interesting to see how Keir Starmer takes the Labour Party forward, and what happens to the momentum rump, which is still there in various forms, and the unions as well, what they're going to do, and what that does to the Labour Party. Who knows?
Particularly with the recent suspension of Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, what do you think that's going to do to the Labour Party? Do we end up with a split party, or two different parties? And civil war within the Labour Party, or where do we go from here with them?
Well, I think Keir Starmer has certainly foreseen that possibility by warning people off having an internal civil war. But I don't know the Labour Party very well, but my external perspective is that it's always been quite factional. And you look at the way the National Executive Committee is kind of formed and how big it is, the scope for factionalism, which obviously it can be very, very poisonous, that's there. As I say, I think momentum still has a big kind of foothold within those systems and structures, and they won't go without a fight. I'm sure they genuinely, passionately believe that Jeremy Corbyn was right and John McDonnell was right on the agenda that they were putting forward, and that we would benefit from that very hard kind of socialism.
I've been reading about this a little bit recently. I think I've mentioned it in previous Facebook Lives. The book Left Out, about the Corbyn years, come out from journalists. And it's kind of an insider's look. There's a kind of a Labour Kremlinology about it. I've just finished the part where they've decided that Tom Watson is too much of a troublemaker and not behind the Corbyn project. So because they can't really fire him because he's got the support of the other wing of the party, they decide to get rid of the entire role of deputy leader. And I thought, this is ridiculous. Like this is absurd if this is how like the Labour Party conducts itself on the internals. You just get rid of the title of someone's job because you don't like the person.
It's straight out of The Life of Brian, isn't it? It's, it's that kind of level of politicking, right? It's very, very schoolboy in so many, and it's driven by ego, which comes back to this point about we need to change the culture. We've just got to change why people get into politics, how they get into politics, and what they do and how they do it when they're there. It's so badly driven by ego.
I mean, that does kind of suggest that they've lost sight of the bigger picture, the reason why they're supposed to be doing what they're doing, which obviously is for the people that voted them in and not for their own internal party squabbles.
Yeah, this is relevant in some ways to like Dominic Cummings right now. I think there's an interesting read across, which is that you want passion in politics. You want people to care. It's an emotive subject. There are lots of things which people who get into politics are motivated by, and they want to try and fix, or they want to try and help others out. And that's great, and you need that. But you also need to be able to listen, and you need to be able to work collaboratively and see the bigger picture and see who you're working for and how you can achieve the best outcomes for the biggest majority. It's not a utilitarian argument as such, but it's that kind of approach. And with the very ideological and the very, very passionate people, I think the first thing that happens, and I think this is where Cummings is going to go wrong, is it's all about, I'm the one with the ideas, I've got the answers, I need to have all the levers in my control so that I can make the vision work, and then the world will be great and wonderful. And very quickly it moves from, I'm doing this for a reason, and I've got a valid reason to do it, and I'm really interested in that end result. And it moves very quickly to, no one's quite giving me the power. I've got the blob or the swamp reacting badly, and I can't get my hands on those levers. And so from the first highly ideal kind of motivation, you move very quickly into, it's just about accreting power. It's all about power. And I think that's where he's going to come unstuck, because he'll spend so much energy trying to do that, and then he won't actually be able to have the impact that he's seeking. And some of his ideas, this is heresy, I'm sure, some of the criticisms that he has of the system, I think are valid. I think he's going about fixing it in not entirely the right way, but some of the criticisms I think are valid or have some validity.
Yeah. Well, and of course that's entirely possible, but it's sort of getting lost in the fact that people are so upset at the way he's behaving and the fact that he's unelected, that they're not seeing those parts that may actually be very useful and valid.
Yeah.
The other criticism that's been levelled is that it creates a bottleneck. When you centralise the power with one person, if all decisions have to go through that person, as appears to be the case to a certain extent at least, it prevents things getting done, which is kind of the opposite of what he claims to be doing, which is, making government and the civil service more nimble.
Yeah, and you're right, Heather. You're absolutely right that you're picking up on that point about people's objections to him are entirely soundly based. His behaviour on a personal basis completely undermines, what he and the government are asking the rest of us to do. And I discussed this at length with friends when his Barnard Castle trip came to light. And I honestly think that he thinks it was okay. He thinks it was within the rules. And I think his approach is, you lot are just too stupid to understand what the rules mean, and you don't interpret them in that way. And that's the other part of this, which I don't like, which is the contempt that he and, dare I say it, that the government at the moment appears to have, not just for us voters, citizens, but their own backbenchers. And there's no way to run a government. There's no way to run a country.
If you look at the people in cabinet, there is a kind of a pattern, which is at one with Cummings, of people who seem to have a chip on their shoulder. They seem to be quite resentful. They seem to be socially awkward. I can't imagine that they get many party invitations. And they seem to quite enjoy upsetting people and sticking two fingers up to anyone who's not part of their ideology or part of their little in-group. And it's not very nice to see. It's not very nice to see those faces and those attitudes every day for the next 4 years at least. And something needs to be done about it, obviously.
That's where we come in, right? That's our job.
Quite.
Absolutely. Come on, would you not much rather look at our faces every day for 4 years or and more? Well, the thing is, guys, I had a whole list of things I wanted to talk to you both about tonight. Particularly different things with you, Tom, with your Foreign Office experience.
Yeah.
And we have literally rattled on for half an hour. Our time is up. We're going to have to ask you to come back, Tom, so that we can go through all of those other things that we wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
But thank you both so much for joining us tonight and for your participation. I'm going to ask you for one final prediction before we sign off tonight. James, I'll ask you first as our party leader. Give me a prediction, please. Who's going to be the next president of the United States?
My God. Well, I mean, I'll go along with the current betting markets and say that it will be Biden. And if, to be a little bit more controversial, I think he'll take Pennsylvania, and I think that'll be a good thing because it'll undermine the argument that the election was so close and it may have been stolen by a few thousand votes.
So you think he'll get more than the sort of minimum 270 electoral college votes? Okay, Tom, over to you. What are your predictions?
I agree. I think that Biden will get it, barring any last-minute upsets where the postal ballots seem to be predominantly Democratic, and if that continues, then I think it's pretty much guaranteed he'll make it. But I think that the fallout will be so protracted and bitter, and the lawsuits will be dragging on. And I think if you look back to 2000, Al Gore finally kind of gave up the day before the Electoral College actually met, which is over a month away. It's mid-December when the Electoral College actually meets. So I wouldn't be surprised if this wrangling goes on, which is just, it's not good for anybody. Trump won't concede, I don't think, until the very last minute.
Prepared than before. We had the PPE.
Have you got your CNN back on again?
I have no idea. I've closed that.
Are we keeping you, Tom?
No. Honestly, there's nothing on my side. That's not me. I don't know who that is.
Rightly worried.
That's not me. I don't know what that is, but it's not me.
Anyway, I very much hope that we're not still talking about who's going to be the next president next week. And for now, I'm going to say good night and thank you.
Good night. Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.
Does have a serious impact straight away. University students here.